Got very good arms.
He didn't fall? Inconceivable.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. With me again today is the aficionado of indie comics, the man that I go to when I need an independent comic recommendation. Chase, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, man. Great to see you. How's it going?
Oh, I'm doing great. You know, I love talking about independent comics, especially with you. You read, it seems like you read everything. You read all these comics that I don't get to. And today we're going to talk about the 5 best independent comic series of 2019. You ready for this, buddy?
Absolutely.
All right. So these are the ones that almost made the list. I know you're going to be disappointed in one of them. I've got Die was close, but no cigar. Middlewest is right there for me. Die. Strange Skies Over East Berlin and Spawn.
Yep.
But my list is so good, not even those guys could crack it. So how about you go with your number 5?
Yeah, so I'll get to that one in a second, but I'll tell you, the ones that didn't make it, it's not really the same list. Because I did read some of the stuff that you did, honestly, but we don't have a ton of crossover. Undiscovered Country was pretty close for me, but it honestly didn't make my list for the top 5. Kanto as well, it didn't make my list. And it's unfortunate, but those are really the 2 that I have read that were good, that I enjoyed, but for whatever reason here and there, they're not my very favorite series. So just getting into it, my number 5 for series overall, Oblivion Song. It almost didn't make the list. It was a toss-up between Oblivion Song and another one. but man, I do love that book so much because it's the concept, it's the character development that really struck me so much. That matters to me a lot when it comes to comic book series. And if a book doesn't really live up to that character development that I want so deeply, then I can't put it in my very top, generally speaking. Again, it'll take some other storytelling elements to really push it upward. But, there was strong, all the way across the board, that series really did it for me. The world building was incredible. From the very get-go, the world was created perfectly and you understood exactly what needed to happen. So the rest of it was all about interpersonal relationships and how it related to the action that was happening. And if you can bring all of that, just superb action, absolutely incredible character development that matters, with the stakes being high, because that's what matters. We're talking about not just his brother's life, Nathan, the main character. We're talking about the fate of all of these people who were lost in this other world, that they created this memorial for. And, like I said, he's been crossing those names off of the memorial and saying, no, I saved that person. He's alive now. The stakes are very high. We're talking about people's lives. And that's the kind of stakes that you want to have in a book to really make it matter. Loved Oblivion Song. I can't recommend it higher. Well, I guess I could if it was 1 through 4.
No, one of the really great character arcs is, the main character he's part of the reason that everyone disappeared or possibly died, and that these monsters were brought over. He feels this tremendous amount of guilt, and it's obviously it's focused on his brother. He needs to go find his brother who he has a bad relationship with, and just the juxtaposition when he finally gets there and he reaches his objective. And I don't want to tell everyone what happens, but it's not what he thought it was. Maybe he might have actually done something good for his brother on accident, so it's just a weird dichotomy of, but he still wants to bring him back, but is it the right thing? And you feel for the main character because the writer makes you feel for him. He says, this is what he did. He feels a tremendous amount of guilt. He wants to save all these people, but is it the right thing to do?
Yeah.
So I couldn't agree with you more on that one. So I don't know if I'm all over Vault Comics. I've been talking about this for a while on the channel. My number 5 comic series of 2019 is The Plot, from Tim Daniel and Mike Morrissey on the writing, Joshua Hickson is the artist. It's just a fantastic horror series. It's like a generational horror drama where you have this family that has been, haunted by this weird like monster, throughout time. And, it's finally visited the new generation. The one son's brother dies, and he's taking care of his niece and nephew, and he has to go back to this family house that they still own. That in the town that they go to, they don't want them there because they have this bad legacy with them of all these bad things that happen to them. And I relate so much with the main character. He's not perfect. He's got flaws, but he generally wants to do the right thing. He wants to help out, his niece and nephew, and he just wants to be left alone. He doesn't want to be blamed for everything that his family did. And it's just a fantastic story. And I'm just so gripped into it. And, it's one of my when an issue of the plot releases, it's my first read that week, even over X-Force.
I really did love the first issue. I haven't kept reading the entire thing. I only got that first one. There were some elements that didn't really strike me as the kind of stuff that I would really love. But man, it was great storytelling and writing. Honestly, I'll say that. And the art was dark and gripping. It was seriously disturbing. I mean, and I'm not spoiling a whole lot by saying this, but when it shows a monster coming back from the dead and trying to kiss you, that is really disgusting. And that I'll tell you, that imagery struck me in a dark way. I was like, I can't cope with this. It was absolutely mind blowing. Yeah, it really threw me for a loop, to be perfectly honest with you.
If you love horror comics and you're not reading the plot, you got to get on it. All right, Chase, what's your number 4?
Awesome. So, you know what? I would have to say that my number 4 is Once and Future. I went back and forth about this book, about where it stands on my list, how I feel about it. And, I hear a lot of people. So again, it comes down to character development for me. It comes down to storytelling. It comes down to the stakes, and when I think about it, like I said before, it is kind of an Arthurian legend kind of story, but it creates this opposite thing. What if he's not the hero, and what if he is trying to take over the world in a negative way and murder everyone who isn't like him, same nationality? And a lot of people saw a lot of negative parallels. I've seen a lot of rage videos about it, but I'll tell you right now, I think that it's a great little allegory, and it shouldn't really affect people negatively the way that people are talking about it. I love it. I think it's a great story. I really do. And the thing that really strikes me the most about this series is, at the end of every single issue, it follows that serial format, and it gives you a shock. Every single issue, it makes you say, whoa, I did not expect that to happen. Every single time, there was at least one storytelling element that threw me for a solid loop, and I was like, what the? And that's great storytelling. Again, the stakes are high. We're talking about the life and death fate of the entire world here. So those are the kinds of things that I really look for in storytelling. The characterization is great. The main character, Duncan, is, he's a shy guy that didn't want to get into trouble, and his grandma pushed him into this vampire hunting world, pulled a gun on him, and forced him into this. And it has some comedy in it. It's not just a horror book. It's a horror meets comedy, and I recommend it. Yeah, it's definitely my number 4.
Yeah, the writer Kieran Gillen's just, as far as any writers go, he's about as on fire as you can get. With Once and Future, he's got Die Out. Wicked Divine's been a perennial seller for a long time, so he's definitely firing on all cylinders.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 4 is The Wrong Earth by Ahoy Comics from Tom Payer and artist Jamal Igle. Not the biggest fan of Jamal Igle, the man, but as an artist, he actually knocks that series out of the park. It is one of the most interesting premises that I've ever read. It's basically, what if Adam West Batman was crossed over with like the Dark Knight Returns Batman, and they went into the other one's world, and just the characters adapting, Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man, or what they're called, and they cross over, and it's just such an interesting story. If he presented that to DC Comics and they turned him down to do that with Batman, they missed out on a huge opportunity, because it's so original and it's such a cool concept for me, to where these, the goody kind of two shoes Batman, swapping over with, the dark and super gritty version of the character. And it's just executed to perfection in the Wrong Earth, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I really, I really like the concept a lot. I only read the very first issue, but from what I read, it looked really cool. And the first issue, like I said, it really did. I'm obsessed with that whole notion of if the first one doesn't strike me, I don't continue forward. The concept was so good that I probably would have kept reading. I'll be perfectly honest, there's only a certain amount of books I can buy. That's just the bottom line. So I had to cut somewhere. Yeah. So that's
absolutely.
Literally the reason.
Expensive love.
Yeah, it sure is. Absolutely.
Yeah. Unfortunately, the series is on hiatus right now while Jamal Igle does what's the name of the comic he's doing? White? I think so. Something like that. So he's taking a year off to work with Kwanzaa.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Chase. What's your number 3 book?
Number 2, right? Number 3. Are we on number 3? Okay, fantastic. Number 3. So this is one where I really didn't have a favorite issue of it, which is really weird, because it really does work together. And I'll say this, I'm a big fan of this series, the TV series. I really loved Angel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was just fantastic as a show. And, I wasn't a huge Buffy fan, because Buffy felt like the teenage drama that Angel was based on. And Angel was more serious and for adults. It's like the show that kids watched after they grew up watching Buffy, almost. Is what it felt like. And that's what kind of attracted me to it. And I'll tell you what I love about the writing from the Angel series. And this is by Boom Comics as well. And Brian Hill's writing this. Well, there's a lot of aspects of it. It not only shows the perfect characterization from the original characters that Joss Whedon created, but it shows a new way of looking at them. And it's kind of bold in the sense that I think it's wonderful that Whedon, gives these writers the chance to interpret the characters in their own way. I'll tell you what, one of my very, very favorite characters of all time is Spike, William. And the way he's
with a soul.
That's right. Yeah. And the way that he's depicted, the way that Brian Hill is writing him, makes me really, really happy to be reading this series. I think it's great. And, there's not really one specific moment that caught me. I think some of it's nostalgia, to be perfectly honest with you. But I do enjoy a lot of Brian Hill's writing, for sure. He wrote my favorite series from 2018, which was actually Killmonger. And so I'm really glad that he is on one of my lists for 2019 as well, because he's really good at what he does. But Angel's really good. I've been enjoying it a lot.
Yeah, that first story arc is so good, and the demon that he uses being like a technology-based demon, it's using social media. Just great social commentary on the ills of social media and how it can take over your life and maybe transform you for the worse. Yes. And he's kind of exploring that with Overclock and Fallen Angels right now, which is a very interesting comic book.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. The only reason it didn't make mine is because I think it's fallen off with the Hellmouth story. It kind of lost the essence of Angel, and it's telling some other characters. But I get that story arc was amazing.
Yeah, I loved it.
Mm-hmm. All right, so my number 3 comic of independent comic 2019 is Blade Runner 2019 from Titan Books. Michael Green, Mike Johnson writing, Andres Guinaldo. I talked about a little bit in yesterday's video about the best comic series. It's just, if you like Blade Runner, if you enjoy sci-fi comic books, it's probably the best sci-fi comic out there, with the exception of some of the X-Men books. I just the execution on it is great, and they tie it into the Wayland Industries kind of lore that's been played out in Blade Runner, as well as a more recent Return to Blade Runner that they did, and the main character Ash, like, she gets put to a choice where basically she has an issue. It's she's not going to be able to fix it anymore. She's been outed as having, she's going to lose her job, or she's going to lose all of her life. And Wayland Industry tries to go in there and use that against her and say, "Listen, we'll take all that away and we'll make you perfect." And she's put to a choice. And I really like the way that the character saw it and the way that the character reacted to it. And it felt true to what they had done with her so far. And I think Ash is one of the better heroines in comics in 2019, in my opinion.
Awesome. Yeah. That's one of the ones I look forward to checking out now that I've heard your take on it.
Absolutely. All right. We're down to the top two, Chase. These better be good. What's number two?
Number two is Middlewest. I absolutely have loved that series. I have a billion reasons for it. It's a self-centered book, I have to say. It's a character-centered book. And instead of it being the fate of the world, it's the fate of myself. And isn't that a worthy cause as well? When you think about it, a lot of these huge stakes come from, I have to save the universe. I have to save the world. Well, this kid, he's just looking for his place in the world. Honestly, he's looking to find his way, and he's coming from a broken home. He's going into a new family, like you said. And I just love the kid on a quest story so much. When it comes down to it, you could kind of think of this almost as a Wizard of Oz story in its own 100%. Right, and it's really cool to see the stakes in my mind be so high for something where everyone else's fate doesn't rest on it, but it's your own fate that ends up mattering so much, and just learning about yourself. Because when it comes down to it, as individuals, we're not trying to save the world, unless we're trying to save the world. We're all just trying to find our place in this world, So it kind of hit home for me, and it made me really, really appreciate. There's so many good things about this series, though. The world development is right on point. It's my number two. It couldn't be my number one because, that's for another book. But it was so close.
What's really interesting, and one of the reasons I can relate to Abel is, his father has a reputation. The town knows who he is, and he has an issue, and Abel doesn't want to be his father. He has some tendencies like that, and he's trying to outrun, or he's on a quest or a destiny to find out and prove to himself that that's not who he is, that he's his own person, and that's not his destiny. And I can always relate to stuff like that. I want to be my own person, and he's trying to discover his own identity, and I really appreciate that about the story.
Yeah, that's awesome as well. That's a great perspective.
Mm-hmm. All right, so my number two is from Image Comics, the only one from Image on the list. Criminal from Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. It's a masterpiece in crime noir. It's so dirty and grimy and gritty, and the art by Sean Phillips just fits it perfectly. And Ed Brubaker just has the perfect voice for these dirty, rotten characters. Like, nobody's a good guy in this book. Even the good guys are bad guys. It's all kind of shades of gray. And one of the really interesting character journeys is Teague Lawless's son, and similar to Middlewest, is his father's destiny his destiny? Is he just another in a long line of lawless family members that's going to be a criminal? And he's been suckered into that, and he makes a lot of poor choices, and just such a fantastic story arc, and it's. In the very beginning of it, it even has an homage to some old school, like comic comic tales that were really interesting. So absolutely wonderful, a piece of art and something I really enjoy reading each and every week.
See, this is another series that I'm going to have to start reading because, you know, a lot of internet friends that I have said that it is one of the best things they've ever read in their entire lives. And since I love indie books so much, it's right up my alley. I don't know why I haven't picked it up yet. I just need to get that first trade paperback.
If you miss the first issue, sometimes it's hard to get back on these. You know, if you miss the first issue, you can't get it back in the store, and you're like, well, I don't want to pick it up at issue 2. You know, the first one's, you know, the icebreaker. So if you don't have the 411 beforehand, sometimes it's easy to miss these great comics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, Chase, let's hear it. I think I know what number 1's going to be, but let me know. Is it a James Tynion book?
Yeah, this is absolutely Something Is Killing the Children. I started out my year thinking that Middlewest, I couldn't find a book that I would love more than that. But gosh, Something's Killing the Children really did it for me. There's a million reasons why. Every single issue shows a new layer of what is actually happening in this book. You know, it starts out and you're thinking, oh, something is happening. And then at the end of that first issue, you're completely shocked to find out that that's not what's happening at all. And then at the end of issue number 2, you find out something kind of similar, that there are more elements happening, that it's not just a monster story, but there are supernatural elements that, you know, leak into the metaphysical world. And it gets even deeper than that. You find out kind of more shocking elements. And the story moves pretty slow, to be honest with you. And so I maybe I like that now. In my younger days, I really liked fast-paced stories the most. And I think intellectual horror, when it comes down to psychological horror and maybe paranormal monster horror, I think maybe that's becoming one of my favorite things. At least with this book, it is. And so, yeah, James Tynion, he takes the absolute number 1 spot. And here's the thing, you know, I like Werther Dell'Edera, the writer. I mean, the artist, but I don't love him. You know, it's very raw art in the sense that things are so gritty that it doesn't seem necessarily to show a lot of detail. You know, it's not detailed, but, you know, it captures the emotion in these characters so well. Even though it's not intensely detailed, it shows what they're feeling. And that is so important to me when it comes down to it. If there's not emotion in a book, I can't relate to it. And I think that's why, even though I don't love this art, I like it. It's the emotion that comes out in the art. And just like the same thing, you know, the stakes are really high. We're talking about, you know, the fate of the main character, James's town, all of the kids, everyone he knows. But even deeper than that, we find out that we're talking about cities all over the U.S. where this has been happening as well. So, yeah, and the turns out to be, you know, the monster hunter, coolest character ever. I am definitely a fan of that dark, brooding, Buffy-ish character that's really hot. So,
yeah, they had this. I remember reading this last issue had one of the best cliffhangers.
Yes.
Of all of 2019. I was like, you can't stop there. I want to know, you know, what's happening next. So, it's been an excellent series. But I'll agree with you on the art. It might not be the most beautiful art or the most finely detailed, but it absolutely sets a fantastic tone for the story. Yeah,
it really does. And, you know, character development matters to me. So, you know, in all of these stories that I've mentioned, all of my favorite picks, I can look at these characters, in the main character in all of these stories based upon the writing, and I can tell out of the Myers-Briggs personality profiler, you know, the psychological profiler that was based upon the psychology of Jung, I can look at it and I can pick out exactly what personality type each one of these characters is, and I pin James as an INTP. If you follow the Myers-Briggs, then you'll know what that means. But that's a big deal to me, to know that the writer could look at characterization and say, look, this is exactly how my character is going to react to all of these situations. They're not all over the place when it comes down to it. So a lot of my favorite picks had to do with the main character, their characterization, and the way that it was written, to be honest.
I'm in the same boat. The only one of my top 5 that I wouldn't say is a character-driven story, and it even kind of was The Wrong Earth. I think that one's more of a premise-driven, but it has good characterization. But all of mine are the same. Especially my number 1 from Vault Comics, These Savage Shores from Ram V. Sumit Kumar. I think his handle's GFS on Twitter. He's like, hey man, you got to check this comic book out. I was like, oh, I'll try and get to it, and I finally got to it. And I was like, oh my goodness, my mind's blown. I'm not really the biggest horror fan in the world, but Vault Comics has turned me that way with Resonant, The Plot, Black Stars Above, and now in the first one was These Savage Shores. Just one of the most beautifully illustrated comics of the year. One of the most expertly executed narratives and plots. He gives Ramvi gives so much of the story elements in the exposition in letter format, and it's a lot of writers try and do that, and it doesn't really work out. He knows what he's doing. It fits perfectly in there, and you get so much lore and characterization as the story moves along, and kind of stories about colonialism and infighting and Civil War and all these things where this monster is basically being pulled around and being used for other people's devices, but he's in love, and he just wants to get back to the woman he loves, and it's just a heartbreaking tale. It put Ram V on the map. It's the reason he's at DC Comics about to write Justice League Dark, and hopefully Sumit Kumar is following him because his art is absolutely superb.
That's fantastic. So looks like These Savage Shores and Criminal are going to be my two next indie comics to catch up with.
Yep. So These Savage Shores, I don't know if there's going to be a sequel, but the trade paperback is available right now.
Yep, I saw that. I'm going to have to pick that up.
I think you'll dig it the most. So I think that wraps up our indie comics top 5 for 2019. Chase, thank you so much for joining me today. Had a blast. We're definitely going to be talking some indie comics in the future.
Awesome. Yeah, dude, it's always great talking with you about comics. Comics are my favorite thing, and so yeah, it's definitely my hobby of choice.
All right, later, bro.
Later. Talk to you soon.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.